I used to think the big things would be what defined my old age. Health scares, funerals, the loss of independence, those moments people write articles about. And yes, those things came, but they weren't what caught me off guard. What surprised me most after turning 80 were the small things, the things no one warned me about, the ones too ordinary to be mentioned, too subtle to prepare for. Little moments that used to pass unnoticed, now they stop me in my tracks. A smell, a silence, a familiar object that suddenly feels like a stranger. They sneak up on me, not with drama, but with weight. And somehow they feel bigger than the milestones ever did. Maybe it's because I have more time now, or maybe it's because I'm paying better attention. Either way, the older I get, the more I realize it's not the big events that shape our later years. It's the little ones. So today I want to share 8 of them. 8 little things that somehow became huge, not because they changed the world, but because they changed something in me. And maybe they've been sitting quietly in your life too, just waiting to be seen. 1. A simple weather alert feels like a warning bell. It was just a beep, a soft notification on the corner of my screen. Severe weather alert in your area. Back when I was younger, in my 50s or 60s, that kind of message would have barely registered. I'd glance at it, maybe check the radar and move on. Bad weather was a nuisance, something to drive through, not something to feel. But now, after 80, that small sound makes me pause. Maybe it's because I live alone now, in a small cottage outside Flagstaff, Arizona. Beautiful country, but not without its extremes. Maybe it's because I know how long it takes me to get to the bathroom in the dark, let alone down a flight of stairs during a storm. Or maybe it's just that, with time, even nature feels louder. That day, the alert was for high winds. I closed the windows, pulled the blinds, double-checked the latch on the back door. I moved through the house slowly, touching each wall like I was steadying myself, not just from the wind outside, but from something deeper. Fear? No. Awareness. When you're younger, you assume you'll bounce, slip, fall, get back up. At 80, you know better. One fall can change the shape of a year. One branch through the window and you're not just cleaning up glass. You're making insurance calls, explaining yourself again and again to voices that speak too fast. So yes, a weather alert is still just a weather alert. But for me now, it's also a question. Are you ready? Not just for the wind, but for the moment when things stop working like they used to. When help isn't always within arm's reach. When you feel acutely the truth no one talks about. Sometimes, the world doesn't adjust to you. You adjust to it, or you fall behind. So I light a candle, I sit quietly, and I listen. Not just to the wind, but to what it stirs in me. 2. A forgotten tear in a favorite shirt stops you cold. I've had that shirt for at least 20 years. Soft denim, faded just right. A left breast pocket where I keep a folded receipt I never throw away. It's been with me through moves, through summers, through loss. So when I put it on last week and my thumb slipped through a tear near the seam, I didn't just notice the fabric. I felt something shift. It's strange how a small rip can feel like a bigger break. I stood there for a long while, still holding the shirt in my hands, staring at the hole like it had just spoken out loud. It wasn't the tear that mattered. It was what it represented. The shirt had survived so much, but now it was aging too. Like me. That shirt had seen mornings with Mary when she'd gently tug at the collar and say, "You're not wearing that to church." It had been there when I carried boxes from our house in Reno to the smaller place after retirement. It had picked up flour when I finally learned to bake her cornbread recipe. 6 years too late. The tear felt personal. I considered tossing it, but I didn't. Instead, I stitched it by hand. Not well, not neatly, but with care. The kind of stitching you only bother doing when something has meaning. That little line of thread isn't invisible. It doesn't hide the damage, but it tells a story about time, about memory, about loving things even after they've worn thin. And now, when I wear it, I don't try to pretend it's new. I wear it because it isn't, because something doesn't need to be whole to be worth keeping. 3. A sunset feels like a message, not a view. I've watched a lot of sunsets in my life, some from porches with Mary beside me, some through a windshield, tired after a long drive. Some I barely noticed, too busy or distracted to look up. But lately, after 80, the sunsets have started to feel different. They feel personal. Last week, just after dinner, I stepped outside with a cup of tea. The sky over Asheville was layered with color. Soft amber melting into a low blue, clouds painted with rose and lavender. It stopped me. Not because it was the most beautiful sunset I'd ever seen, but because it felt like it was meant for me, not for everyone, just me. I didn't pull out my phone, didn't think about capturing it. I just stood still on the porch steps, one hand on the railing, watching. And in that stillness, something inside me loosened. I could feel my chest open, not in awe, but in recognition. I know this sounds strange, maybe even sentimental, but that sunset didn't feel like a view. It felt like a message, like the sky was saying, "You're still here." And maybe you've needed to hear that too. At this age, it's easy to feel like the world has moved on. The calls come less often. You're no longer the first one they update, or even the second. People mean well. Life gets busy, but the silence grows, slow and wide, until you begin to wonder if you're still on the map. And then the sky explodes in color, and it doesn't ask anything of you, doesn't expect you to respond. It just shows up. Soft and brilliant. And for a few quiet minutes, you feel seen again. Not by someone maybe, but by something greater. The day, the light, the rhythm of a world that hasn't forgotten how to reach you. That night, I stayed out until the last orange faded. I whispered, "Thank you." Not sure who I was thanking. God, time, the sky itself. But deeply grateful nonetheless. I used to chase sunsets, in photographs, in travel, in moments that looked good on paper. Now, I just wait for them. Because when they arrive, they don't just light up the sky. They light something up inside me. And that's not just beautiful, that's holy. 4. Feeling queasy after a snack hits different now. I used to eat whatever I wanted. I had a stomach like steel in my younger years. Burgers at midnight, gas station jerky, leftover pizza straight from the fridge. A little heartburn now and then, sure, but nothing worth slowing down for. So when I turned 80, I thought, finally, I'll eat cleaner, lighter, better. I expected fewer temptations, less appetite, maybe even a kind of freedom. But what I didn't expect was how fragile eating would feel. It started with something as innocent as a muffin. A blueberry muffin, to be exact. Soft, sweet, not too big. I picked it up from a local bakery in Eugene, Oregon. A little treat after my morning walk. Nothing special. But 20 minutes after eating it, my stomach began to churn. Not pain exactly, just discomfort. Like my body couldn't quite figure out what to do with it. I sat down, then lay down, sipped water, rubbed my belly like a child, and for the rest of the day I felt off. Not sick enough to call anyone, not serious enough to panic, just enough to make me feel vulnerable. And that's what surprised me most. At this age, a queasy stomach doesn't just feel like a bad moment. It feels like a threat. A reminder that your systems aren't what they used to be. That food, something you've trusted all your life, can suddenly betray you. It's not just muffins either. It's heavy sauces, leftover chicken, that third cup of coffee I used to love. Each bite comes with a quiet negotiation now. Will this sit okay? Will I regret it later? Is this worth the risk? And yes, I know that sounds dramatic. But when your day depends on small comforts, a warm meal, a calm stomach, the ability to take a nap without nausea, one bad snack can throw the whole thing off. What's worse is how invisible it all is. No one sees you decline the cookies at the party and understands the full backstory. They just think you're picky or difficult. But the truth is, we're not avoiding pleasure. We're avoiding consequence. Because when your body starts whispering, you learn to listen. Carefully. I never expected food to make me cautious. But now I take smaller bites. I chew longer. I sit up straighter while I eat. And afterward, I wait. Not because I'm afraid, but because I've learned that even joy needs gentleness now. Still, some days, I eat the muffin anyway, because sometimes that little risk feels like a quiet rebellion. And sometimes, it reminds me that I'm still living. 5. Misplacing your glasses can ruin your whole day. I used to laugh when people said they misplaced their glasses. How do you lose something that's on your face? I'd joke. Or around your neck? And then I turned 80. Now I have 3 pairs. One for reading, one for walking, and one I call backup, which mostly lives in a drawer I can never seem to remember opening. One Tuesday morning, I woke up early and shuffled into the kitchen for coffee, reached for the kettle, looked for my reading glasses to check the recipe on the tea box, and they were gone. Not on the table, not on the counter, not on my head either. I checked. I spent 25 minutes searching, under cushions, in the laundry basket, even outside by the porch chair. All the while, I felt something slowly creep in, not panic, not anger, but something heavier. A kind of disorientation. Because it's not just about the glasses. It's about the moment when you realize how much you depend on something so small to function. And when that small thing disappears, you feel helpless. Worse than helpless, you feel exposed. Like the world is slightly out of focus and you can't quite catch up. I sat down in the armchair, frustrated. No tea, no reading, just silence. And then, I reached into my shirt pocket for a tissue. And there they were, folded, waiting, right where I put them. I laughed, harder than I had in days, not because it wasn't ridiculous, but because it was. Because this is what aging does. It turns the tiniest missteps into full-blown detours. It tests your patience, your memory, and your sense of humor all at once. But that laugh, it saved the morning. Because in that moment, I wasn't just a forgetful old man. I was human. Trying, still learning, still losing things, still finding them again. And somehow, that felt like enough. 6. A friendly scooter passing by feels like belonging. It was just a blur of red. A teenager zipped past my front porch on a bright red scooter, long hair trailing behind, earbuds in, backpack bouncing slightly on her back. She wasn't looking at me. She probably didn't even notice the man sitting behind the screen door with a book in his lap and tea cooling beside him. But right before she disappeared around the corner, she raised one hand in a lazy wave. It wasn't directed. Not exactly. But it felt like it was. And that small, silly wave, something she probably does 10 times a day, stayed with me longer than I expected. I sat there smiling to myself. Not because I knew her. Not because she said anything. But because, for the first time in days, I felt included. It's strange how small moments like that feel enormous now. When I was younger, my days were full of greetings, handshakes, nods of recognition, coworkers, neighbors, people at the store. I had rhythm with the world around me. But after 80, those rhythms thin out. People move faster. Conversations shrink. You become part of the background. So when someone, even by accident, acknowledges your presence, it feels like the world is letting you back in, just for a second. I told my daughter about it later that week. She smiled and said, "It's nice when people are friendly." But it wasn't just friendliness, it was recognition. It said, without words, "You're still part of this place. You're not invisible." There's a path near my home in Eugene that runs alongside the creek. Sometimes I walk it slowly with my cane. And I've started to notice who else uses it. Joggers, cyclists, other older folks, teenagers on skateboards or scooters. We don't talk much, but we nod. We move aside for each other. We share that narrow trail like we share the town. And those small acknowledgments, the ones you could easily miss, have become enormous to me. Because they remind me that I'm not just aging quietly in a chair. I'm here, still showing up, still being seen, still part of the world that spins a little faster than I do. And when that scooter zipped by and that hand rose for half a second, it reminded me that sometimes you don't need a conversation to feel connection. Sometimes a glance is enough. Sometimes a wave is everything. 7. A YouTube notification feels like a visit. When I first set up the tablet, it was purely practical. I wanted to check the weather, maybe read the news without squinting at the small print of the local paper. My daughter helped me pick one that wasn't too heavy, set it up with a few apps, and showed me how to tap here and swipe there. I nodded, half listening, just grateful for her patience. One thing she insisted on was turning on notifications. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Weeks passed. I used it now and then, nothing urgent. Then one afternoon, quiet as usual, I was making tea when I heard a soft chime from the corner of the room. The tablet screen had lit up. New video uploaded. Morning walks with Grandpa Joe. I don't know who Grandpa Joe is. I didn't subscribe to his channel on purpose. But the name made me smile. So I tapped it. The video was simple. A man, maybe a few years younger than me, walking through his neighborhood in Ohio, talking softly about the trees, how the leaves were turning early that year, and how the air felt different on his skin that morning. It wasn't polished. There was no fancy editing. Just footsteps, wind, breath, and the occasional bird in the distance. And yet, I watched the whole thing. Not because it was exciting, because it was familiar, because for 10 minutes, I wasn't alone. That small voice, talking about nothing urgent, nothing important, felt like a neighbor stopping by the fence for a chat. It reminded me of the days Mary and I would take early walks in the cooler months, when we'd leave the house before sunrise and just wander in silence until our feet led us home. Since then, I've kept the notifications on. I've watched quiet cooking channels, people restoring old furniture, birdwatchers sharing their finds, young folks reviewing books I've never heard of. Some make me laugh, some make me cry. Most just make me feel like I've been invited into someone else's moment. And that invitation these days feels like gold. That soft ding has become a part of my day, not because it gives me something to do, because it reminds me that someone, somewhere, thought to share something. And for that brief moment, I get to witness it. Sometimes I leave a comment, usually short, sometimes clumsy. Beautiful trees, thank you. Or, reminds me of my walks with my wife. Sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. But the act of writing, of showing up, even through a screen, feels like holding up a candle in the dark and having someone nod from across the room. There are days when no one calls, when I don't leave the house, when my voice feels rusty from disuse, and then the tablet lights up. And I'm reminded, I'm still part of the world. It's not a big gesture, but it's enough. Technology at this age doesn't need to be groundbreaking. It just needs to be kind. And when it is, when it shows up gently, without judgment, without rush, it feels like a friend knocking softly at the door saying, "Hey, I'm here, and I thought of you." And for me, that's more than technology. That's presence. And presence, even in pixels, can make a heart feel just a little less alone. 8. A bruise that doesn't hurt makes you stop and think. I noticed it while drying off after a shower. A small bruise, no bigger than a walnut, on the inside of my forearm. Purple, yellow, with that soft edge like watercolor spreading on paper. I didn't remember bumping into anything. No pain, no soreness. Just there. When I was younger, I would have ignored it completely. Now, I sat on the edge of the bed and just looked at it. It's strange what a bruise can hold. It's such a small thing, a smudge beneath the skin. But at this age, it doesn't feel small. It feels like a message, not an emergency, not even a warning, just a reminder that the body is softer now, that time is leaving signatures, that sometimes things happen beneath the surface and you won't even know until you spot the evidence later. I pressed on it gently. Still no pain, but something in me ached anyway. Not the arm, the awareness. Because after 80, the body changes in ways no one really prepares you for. Yes, they warn you about arthritis, balance, hearing, eyesight. But no one tells you about the quiet things, the marks that appear without cause, the skin that bruises with the lightest touch, the feeling that even your body has become unfamiliar territory. Later that morning, I showed it to my daughter on a video call. She smiled kindly and said, "That's pretty normal, Dad. Your skin's just thinner now. Nothing to worry about." And I nodded, because medically, she's right. But emotionally, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like a symbol of fragility, of memory, of how life touches us in ways we can't always see until later. I started thinking about other bruises I've carried, not the ones on my skin, but the ones on my heart. The arguments I never resolved, the chances I didn't take, the people I still miss. All the quiet aches I've collected over the years, tucked beneath the surface. And just like this one, many of them didn't hurt at first, but over time, they deepened, softened, spread. Some healed without a trace. Others faded, but never fully left. A bruise, I've come to believe, is the body's way of saying, that mattered. Not enough to break you, but enough to mark you. And when you're 80, when the world is quieter and the mirror more honest, even the smallest mark can carry the weight of a memory. I didn't cover the bruise. I didn't hide it. Instead, I let it stay. I looked at it every morning for a week. Watched it shift colors like autumn leaves, purple to brown to yellow to gone. And then I forgot about it, until I found another one, smaller this time, near my knee. Same feeling, that small jolt of awareness, that pause, that question. When did this happen? But now I don't meet it with worry. I meet it with tenderness, because these marks, visible or not, remind me that I'm still here, still being shaped, still responding to the world around me. And maybe that's the part no one talks about, that the body, even in its quiet unraveling, is still telling a story, and it's worth listening to. These 8 little things weren't on any checklist. No one told me to watch for them. No doctor mentioned them. No retirement guide warned me. They arrived quietly, unannounced, uninvited, like leaves drifting in through an open window. And somehow, each one carried more weight than I ever expected. A bruise, a glance, a misplaced object, a wave from a stranger, a soft chime from a tablet in the corner of the room. None of them seem important. Until they are. Because after 80, life shifts. Not all at once, not with trumpets, but slowly, subtly. It starts speaking in smaller voices. And if you don't slow down, you'll miss what it's saying. These little things, they aren't nuisances. They're invitations to feel, to pause, to remember, to belong. I used to think the big stuff would be the hardest, and in some ways, it is. But the small things, they're the ones that catch you off guard, the ones that ask you softly, "Are you still paying attention?" And I am. I'm paying more attention now than I ever have, because I've learned that a life isn't made of milestones. It's made of quiet mornings, small details, little aches, half smiles, gentle waves, and colors in the sky that you only notice if you're still enough to see them. So, if you're walking this same road, or know someone who is, I hope these truths find you, not to overwhelm you, but to remind you, if something feels bigger than it used to, you're not alone. You're just paying closer attention now, and that in itself is something beautiful.